What is up? What is going on, everybody? It has been a minute, but I am back and I've got MarinersSUR with me as well. The winter meetings are underway. The baseball offseason is underway as well. We've had some big signings already happen. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of that. We'll talk about some good news for the Mariners with the draft pick and our thoughts on what we could see here the next few weeks, few months, whatever it takes as we get closer to opening day, which is just about 3.5 months away now. It is flying by. Before I dive into it, as always, do me a favor, smash the like button, helps out the channel tremendously. And don't forget to subscribe as well. Leave your comments down below and head over to Twitter X and give MarinersSUR a follow. For my money, the best Mariners Twitter account on Twitter X, and his information will be linked in the description down below. And I do apologize to everybody for the lack of content recently. I have been battling the flu, strep throat, everything that could possibly be thrown at one person I've been dealing with. So, and I got to follow the Mariners, so it's a tough chore. But we are into the off season. Let's start with some good news for the Seattle Mariners today. They end up with the number 3 pick in the draft. They had a 0.5% chance to get the number 1 pick, and I think a 1% chance to get the number 3 pick. Pretty cool news. I mean, I know we want some moves to happen, but pretty big news for this organization.
Yeah, I would agree. I honestly forgot the lottery is even going on, and I happened just to glance at X, and I think at that point it was like 8 teams to go to be revealed, and I was like, holy smokes, what's going on? Like, the Mariners, I haven't been revealed yet. This is crazy. And I didn't realize at the time, but I think Joe Doyle had tweeted that they draw the lottery balls for like the top 6 teams. And so once the Mariners got passed over at 15, 14, 15, he knew they were going to be in the top 6, which I didn't know at the time. So something to keep in mind moving forward. But yeah, that's a big deal. To add a top 3 pick in the MLB draft, my assumption is that's probably like a top 50 prospect right away. Not only that, their draft pool money is significantly more. And I think they have like the 31st or 32nd pick as well for like a compensation pick or competitive balance or something like that. So, I mean, it's huge news to have that budget growth, but also, the 3rd pick, they're going to get, like I said, a bona fide top end prospect. So I think everybody's probably thrilled. John Stanton may not be because, here's like $5 million he probably wasn't expecting to spend. So hopefully that doesn't affect our payroll, but you never know with him. But I mean, really just, tremendous news for them to be able to line up and get a premium prospect that really wasn't expected. So a strong farm system is only going to get much, much stronger come the 2025 MLB draft. So very exciting news.
Yeah, it is sad that I genuinely look at that and go, oh, is Stanton going to spend whatever little he was going to spend this offseason is going to be less now because of this? It all joking aside, it is something to maybe think about because I doubt they thought they were going to get the number 3 pick in the draft. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously that aside, great news for the organization. Like you said, I mean, you look at the names that are out there. You got a Holiday, the pitcher from Florida State. I can't remember his name, the left-handed pitcher.
Jamie Arnold, I think.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, just and then the outfielder from Texas A&M that I'm not going to butcher his name. I'm not a college baseball guy, but I mean, one of those guys, if you want them, is going to be a Seattle Mariner, which is just crazy. You think where this team was last year, a 10-game lead in the division at one point, and now they could end up with, if some things fall their way, the number 1, someone that could be a number 1 prospect in baseball in a few years to go along with a system that already has guys like Montez and Colt Emerson at the top of it. So some pretty exciting news for this organization. And listen, I said it in a little short today, get your thoughts on it. We can be critical of this team in a lot of areas, but they've been very solid at drafting and developing talent. So I think we got to feel pretty good. Obviously, even if they weren't good at it, you feel good about having the number 3 pick. But I think overall, you got to be really excited about this.
Oh, for sure. They've turned pitchers that have been drafted 2nd, 3rd. I think Logan Evans was like 12th round. They've turned them into elite prospects. I want to say Logan Gilbert. Well, Emerson Hancock was drafted higher, but Logan Gilbert was, 2nd, I think, highest drafted pitcher. And so, yeah, they're going to be able to get a guy that is coming out of college with stuff that they probably aren't used to having kind of right out of the box. And so I think that's exciting. And then to your point, in recent drafts. They've done a very, very good job at identifying like high school talent and developing them with Cole Young, Colt Emerson, Johnny Farmello. And so now they might be able to land the top high school prospect in the draft. So anyway, you kind of chop it up, they're probably going to have talent out of the box that is higher end than they're used to. And to your point, they've done a very, very good job developing players. And like I said, I think position player was a little bit of a mixed bag initially, but they also focus kind of initial picks on pitchers. So that could be part of it. And we haven't seen what guys like Colt Emerson, Farmello, Young can do, but by all reports, they should be good major leaguers. So I think they've really kind of dialed in their position player development too. So yeah, I'm really excited to see who they can grab with that third pick and what they become. And if it's a college player, they could be here sooner than later. And, in a year or two, if it's a pitcher, maybe a year, position player, 2 years. So they're really not that far off. So yeah, that's a huge development for the organization for sure.
Yeah, I know Arnold's a guy, the Florida State guy, that I think a lot of people view as very close to being big league ready. And you were comparing him. We were talking, on Twitter about a Chris Sale comparison with him. Do you have anybody? Obviously, we don't know who's going to go 1 and 2. I think the Nationals and the Angels are picking 1, 2. But if you had your pick of the litter, not to put you on the spot, is there anybody in particular you would go with, or still too early? Not really sure, but if you draft was tomorrow, Mariners were number 1, who would you go with?
Yeah, it's early and I haven't really had a chance to dive into it, and kind of like yourself, not a huge college baseball or high school baseball. So it's kind of going off what I've read. Initially my thought would have been Ethan Holiday. That's just been a name that's been out in the news for several years, but it sounds like he's kind of maybe backtracked a little bit. And I don't know if it's because if it's bat from what I read today, probably no longer going to be at shortstop. Third base is the best outcome, but can maybe go into right field too. So I think there's maybe some defensive concerns in terms of like if he was a shortstop, probably number 1 overall pick. So I think his bat's still pretty highly regarded. Yeah, that Texas A&M kid I think would be interesting. So I think for him maybe 1A, and then 1B would be that Jamie Arnold. Like I said, I watched a highlight video and initially I was like, holy, he kind of looks like Chris Sale. Then I went and read a report on MLB.com, and that was the comp that they had dialed in there just from his kind of funky arm slot and 95 to 98, really good sweeper, developing changeup. So that's probably 1A, 1B for me. But if Ethan Holiday were to be a pick at 3, I think that might be the most exciting pick for me just because it is this huge name and a high school player. So yeah, I think either way, any way they go, it'll be exciting, but those are kind of probably the 1A, 1B and, number 3, if you will.
Yeah, I don't think you can be disappointed no matter what they do. I saw the same thing. I saw Joe Doyle did a quick mock draft and had Holiday all the way down at number 10.
Yeah.
But I think if you're the White Sox at 10, you'd be ecstatic to get him down there. But yeah, and for people going, oh, why Jamie Arnold? Why a pitcher? And obviously I think he'll be pretty close to major league ready, but that would be 2026, maybe even, early 2027. Who knows what's going to happen by then with the rotation. So baseball is just a different animal than football. I think football is a sport where you do focus a little bit more on need over just best player available. Baseball, it's a little different. If you've got a pitcher of that talent that you think is the next Chris Sale, I'm absolutely fine with putting that in there and adding him. Because listen, you don't know who's going to be here. There's a chance that Gilbert or Kirby doesn't re-sign. I don't want to go doom and gloom here, but you never know. Castillo might be gone by then. So there will definitely be room for someone on this starting staff. So some good news to start off the night for the Mariners. Let's move on to a little bit of winter meeting off-season stuff. No moves yet for the Mariners outside of some kind of, depth pieces, some depth, maybe bullpen pieces that would probably fit more in Tacoma and come up to Seattle throughout the year. But there have been some rumors, and I want to get your take on some of them. The first one was one that's kind of circulated this week. Now, I want to be clear too. I don't know if there's been anything official that these rumors are 100% true, but it's been floated out there. I do think Divish talked about it a little bit with Adam Jude. But the first rumor was with Boston for their first baseman, Tristan Casas, who I like, but it sounds like they again wanted Kirby or Gilbert for him, and then maybe Brian Wu, if I read that correctly, but then the Mariners want another prospect, a top prospect in return for that. What's your thoughts on that rumor with Casas and for one of the Mariners pitchers?
Yeah, like you, I like Tristan Casas a lot. A young player, pretty good prospect pedigree, has had, pretty good run when he's healthy in the MLB, but For me, he's a first baseman. I think he had like a 119 WRC plus last year. 130 was kind of his high water mark. He does have a lot of club control left, but for me, first base it's just not a premium defensive position. And so I think to really, really spend and like a Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, it needs to be somebody that's like a bona fide middle of the order bat. And Costas could certainly be that, but he hasn't been quite when he's on the field. And then with injury concerns, he's not there either. So a player I'm very, very interested in, but with the asking price that's been circulated, I wouldn't pay that either if I were Jerry, just because, I think his like high water marks 1.7 F4. Carlos Santana was 2.2 last year. Odds are they'll probably produce similarly this year. Once again, Costas could break out and double that, but I'd rather spend 7-8 million on Santana and keep Bryce Miller if that's what it is. But yeah, if they want to take something like, I don't know, Logan Evans and a couple other prospects, MLB ready guys like Ryan Bliss, and I would certainly do that. But I think it has to be that and not what their initial ask was. So yeah, player I like, but the price has to be right. If he was a second baseman with like a 120, 130 WRC plus with 3 to 4 years to go, I would probably be a lot more inclined to do so. But at first base, yeah, it's not something that I think the Mariners should be interested in for any of their starters.
Yeah, agreed 100. And I really like Tristan Casas. Honestly, he would be a guy that I would target, but I just look at it like, okay, you trade Bryce Miller for Tristan Casas. Yeah, your offense is better. But overall as a team, are you better? Like maybe you're a little more balanced, but I don't think the Mariners are better with that move. Now they've got to replace Bryce Miller. I don't, Emerson Hancock to me is fine as like a 6 starter, spot starter, but I'm not putting him necessarily in my rotation. So it just makes things murky to me. And like I said, Casas isn't like, I really like him, but he's not a lock either. He's had some injury issues. I think it's been more kind of freak injuries, but
yeah,
you just never know. So I'm with you with second baseman with those numbers. Yeah, we can maybe discuss it, but for a first baseman, I just feel like you can get kind of similar production from a Santana and keep Bryce Miller and Brian Wu and those guys. That does kind of lead me into my next question, though. And I think it's where the Mariners, I don't want to say struggling to make moves. The offseason's just begun. We've got a long way to go. But I think one kind of roadblock they're running into, and we've talked about this a little bit off the air, is that teams aren't just wanting prospects. They're wanting major league ready talent. I think the Mariners are probably willing to trade some of their upper end prospects, obviously not all of them. And I think maybe a Colt Emerson might be untouchable, but I think they're willing to part with some other guys, but it's tough to find a trade partner. And I know it's kind of making excuses for Jerry, but he did say it the other day, like, that, with the expanded wild card, there's more teams in contention. It's harder to sell prospects to these teams. Your thoughts on that? Because I think it's been kind of a roadblock for the Mariners. Now, part of this is they've made their own bed with some of this. So, they only have themselves to blame that they're now in this position. But I do think it's a legit roadblock that they're running into.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think Dipoto even said that, I want to say it was yesterday, where like we've been more aggressive than in years past and dangling like our top end prospects. But yeah, to your point, it seems like teams just in the offseason aren't super inclined to trade MLB talent for prospects. And so, yeah, I think it is definitely a roadblock. I think Jerry has some hope that could change as, more guys go off the board and it gets a little bit more clear for what teams are looking at. But like outside of the White Sox, I just don't know if there are many teams that will do a MLB player for a prospect deal. And then, one of the things hindering the Mariners is they don't have like a position of real strong depth where it's like, all right, we have too many guys here, so we can do that. The one position I would say is maybe outfield with like a Luke Raley or even Randy Rosarina. But then again, like Rayleigh's penciled in at first or Rosarina left. So then you'd be creating another hole. So they don't have that situation like the Cubs where you have a Matt Shaw coming up and now you can dangle a Nico Horner. So they are in a tough spot there. And yeah, it concerns me of what the offseason will turn out to be if some team doesn't step up to the table and are willing to acquire a prospect for, a major league talent. So hopefully that does take a turn in our favor, or it could, the offseason may not go like anybody wants.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because every time me and you are discussing trades, And there's a reason you're always kind of bringing the White Sox into it, because I really do think they're a team. They might be the only team, honestly, because the Angels are buying. Even the
Yep.
A's signed Luis Severino. You go to the NL, maybe the Marlins, but I don't know what the Marlins really have, and the
Yep.
Rockies. Uh, they're the team that you kind of have to get involved on that third team to send prospects to the White Sox in order to get some of these talents. Because I know it's funny, every time me and you go over a trade, it's like, okay, how can we bring the White Sox into this
Yep.
deal to send them some prospects here? Because, yeah, it creates a roadblock. And I thought you made a great point. The Mariners don't have that depth at positions to really, like you mentioned, the Cubs, with Matt Shaw being able to trade like a Nico Horner, the Orioles with Jordan Westberg, they could trade, Ramon Urias, someone like that. The Mariners don't have that. It would be funny if, they had something like Jorge Polanco had a big season last year and they picked up his option. You could trade a Polanco and you have Cole Young coming up. That would be, a spot. But other than that, and that didn't work out. So unfortunately that they're kind of stuck having to maybe trade a starting pitcher, which is why
Yep.
it's come up a lot, or dealing those prospects, and teams just aren't super eager. And listen, I want to be clear too. Like, the prospects have value. You could obviously, if the Mariners said Colt Emerson's for sale, someone's going to jump at that, but it's just not necessarily the deals that you're looking for to make the 2025 Mariners, unfortunately any better. What do you think ends up happening? Do you think they're going to end up having to trade a starter here? I've been against it, but I've kind of come around to, like, I can stomach trading Luis Castillo at this point. Where are you at on that?
Yeah. I mean, my hunch is that they won't. If they were to win the Roki Sasaki lottery, I think they probably would, even though they'd go to a 6-man rotation. I think at that point they'd be okay with like Emerson Hancock or Logan Evans as a 6-man. And at that point, I could see him doing it. But I think they're going to probably stray away from it if I had a guess. But with the starting pitching market being so, I think just it's out. I mean, Eovaldi just got 375. So Castillo now has got a very, very good contract. And so now it's to the point where I think you could trade him for, a legitimate bat. And now it frees up 25 million to go get another bat or two. But then you have to once again sign like a pitcher and they're going for a ton. So I think there's a little bit weary of it. So my hunch says they won't, but if we get into January and nothing's kind of shaken loose for them, I mean, they may have to. They may not have another option, but I think it will be an absolute last resort come mid to late January before they really pursue that, unless a team blows them away with an offer for somebody before then.
Yeah, and that actually perfect segue into my next question. They've said that Roki Sasaki is kind of their top priority right now, which, I think to most fans listening may be a little surprising that a pitcher is their top priority. I think, we all kind of think they need offense. What's your thought on that? Is it something they want to go 6-man rotation? Or are they doing it so it's easier to trade Castillo? I know you kind of hinted at it already with the 6-man rotation, but what's your thoughts on that? What do you think their thought process is with having him as kind of a top priority?
Yeah, I think it's just as simple as that, like, he doesn't cost anything. It'd be like getting a pitcher from AAA who doesn't have MLB control. Service. So you get him for 3 years at the league minimum, and then ARPS. I think it's just in their mind, it's this potential. If he was in AAA, he might be the top prospect in baseball. So I think it's in a way where you can almost go get one of the best prospects in baseball for essentially free. So I just think that it's too good of an opportunity to pass up with, probably the secondary benefit of now having the ability to go trade a starter for, a couple big bats and really kind of rounding out the team. So I think it might be as simple as that.
Do you think they'd go with the 6-man rotation? I mean, obviously, listen, that's if they'd have to find a trade partner for somebody, but do you think that's something they kind of want to do? They've done it in the past. That was more with prospects like Justin Dunn, and I think they tried it a little bit in 23, and then Hancock got hurt. Is that something you think they're thinking about doing?
Yeah, I don't know if they like really, really want to, but I think it's more so along the lines of if in their conversations, Roki really prioritizes and kind of puts a high degree of weight on going to a team with a 6-man rotation, they would accommodate it because he's that good. But I don't think they necessarily want to or need to. I think it just would be more like a recruiting pitch of, hey, we're willing to go to a 6-man rotation if that's what will make you sign here, basically. So just something that, like I said, another recruiting pitch, I think.
Yeah, and listen, I've said before, it's for people wondering, why they're going after pitching. Like you said, it's essentially kind of a freebie for them, in for lack of a better term. And listen, if you can make the team better, make it better. I'm not. More run prevention is not a bad thing for this team to keep teams off the board. So if you can add Sasaki, even if you don't trade Castillo, I mean, your rotation is easily the best, and now you've got depth. So if God forbid, Logan Gilbert misses a month, you're probably not going to get killed by something like that. So
that's a good point.
It would really help the team. So I'm against the team just getting better. I don't care necessarily what avenue it has to be. I just want the Seattle Mariners to be a better overall team. On the pitching side, they did get some good news as well. It sounds like Matt Brash and Jackson Kowar are both ahead of schedule and could be back sooner rather than later. Any thoughts on that? Listen, for me personally, I think with the bullpen, we saw some struggles. Like Stanek held it down for a while, but they missed Gregory Santos and Matt Brash last year. And I think those are little things that, we don't view it as, acquisitions because they're Mariners, but I think could be a big boost to the team next year.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's easy to forget just how dominant and good Matt Brash is. I mean, I think when he's healthy, he's one of the best relievers in baseball. Like you said, that 7th, 8th inning last year was troublesome for the majority of the season. And so the fact that he may be back by the end of April and only miss a month or so is huge. I don't know if it changes their offseason plans. It might, because they just have such a limited amount of money to spend. So at this point, they might say, hey, let's not spend $5 or $6 million or whatever it is on another Ryan Stanek type. Let's just put that money elsewhere, and we'll just kind of patch it together for the first month of the season, which I think is defendable. Just if they had more budget, I'd say absolutely go get another reliever like Sewald. But the budget is what it is. So I think that Brash news is very, very significant, because if he's healthy and right, it just makes the bullpen. I feel much better about it from day one with him and Munoz at the back end, and then you just hope that Snyder, Taylor, Santos, one or two of them can kind of help on the 6th or 7th as well, then they should be in a really good spot.
Yeah, 100%. And, again, kind of segueing into my next question here, listening to Dan Wilson today. Now, I don't want to put too much stock into what he said, because all coaches and managers are going to defend their guys. And he was pretty adamant. He was happy with the team the way it is right now. And again, I'm not going to read into that. They're 100% going to try to make moves. I don't know if they will or what they'll do. I don't know how much fans will like it, but I do think they're going to add somebody this offseason. But I do wonder if there is a little bit, and people can agree or disagree with it, but if they do think with what they did in September, with Edgar as the hitting coach and Dan as manager, bringing in Kevin Zeitzer, which I think was a fantastic hire, and having Edgar for a full season, I do think there is a little bit of hope that the current roster takes a step forward. You get more consistency from Julio. You get the Matt Brashes and Jackson Kowars and Gregory Santos is back. Do you think there is a little bit of them banking? And I'm not saying they should do this, but a little bit of banking on kind of the current roster taking a step forward, a full year of Randy Arozarena as well.
Yeah, I do. And I don't know if it's like out of necessity because they know they don't have a ton of budget, or if it more so is like, hey, because they were 21-13 with Dan, which is a 100-win pace. The offense looked way, way different. And I think they do maybe think they found something with like messaging and approach, because I think they've kind of even said this, not directly, but that, with Edgar, they really just simplified things. And I think maybe pre-Edgar, they were just, I don't want to say too detailed, but maybe in a way, just things weren't simple enough for hitters to kind of go out and execute. So I think they maybe feel really good about what the results were, maybe even feedback from hitters of like, hey, yeah, we really liked how we put together scouting reports and approaches, the last month and a half of the season. So I think there's a little bit, it's like out of necessity, but also like a true belief they maybe found kind of a new way to go about their hitting program that they think can be carried over. So yeah, and I tend to agree with them. We'll kind of see what happens this year, but yeah, I think Edgar and Seitzer are both tremendous hitting coaches, so it can only help.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was some, maybe drama is the wrong word, but some certainly issues with Brant Brown last year. I think Scott's message was getting stale. He'd been here
Yeah.
9 years. It makes sense. So I don't think they're wrong for thinking that they found something. I definitely think they're justified in that. But obviously I want them to make moves. I don't want them to just roll out what they have. For anybody listening, thinking that, that's not at all what I'm implying. But it is something to keep an eye on, that definitely you want to improve from outside the organization, but there's also guys within the organization that can take a step forward to help this team in 2025. Any moves that have kind of surprised you here so far in this offseason? Obviously, we had the Juan Soto deal to the Mets. Not that we thought the Mariners were in on Juan Soto or anything like that, but you made a good point when that happened, that it's probably the best thing that could happen for the Mariners. Him getting out of the American League opens it up a little bit. We knew the Mariners weren't going to get Soto. What's your thoughts on that deal?
Yeah, not a huge surprise. Kind of stays in New York. But yeah, I agree. Getting him out of the AL is huge. So I was happy to see that. In terms of deals that have surprised, I think just like at an overall level, the pitching contracts have been way more expensive than I thought. Like Max Fried was like 8 years, 218 million. Eovaldi, 375. Boyd, 230. I mean, all these were just from an AAV more than I thought. Than like Fried getting 8 years, I thought was interesting. I'd say the one deal that surprised me was probably the Blue Jays move today, trading for Andres Jimenez, who's got like 100 million left on 5 years, and he hasn't been a good hitter for 2 years now. So right now he's kind of this elite defender at second base, and that's about it. And they gave up a guy, Horwitz, who was good as a rookie, who the Blue Jays actually just flipped to the Pirates, it looks like, for some pretty decent pitching. And so I think it maybe just kind of hones in on the fact that the Blue Jays, I think, drastically overpaid. So I didn't get that move at all. So yeah, I thought that one was very kind of head scratching for sure. What about you?
Yeah, that was the first one to me that was just that, I can usually justify most moves. I can go, okay, like I don't love it, but I get it. I get why the team's doing this. I don't get that move for the Blue Jays at all. I'm not wild on Jimenez without the contract, to be perfectly honest. Then you factor that in. I'm not even convinced that Jimenez is better than Spencer Horwitz, to be honest. And I know we kind of talked that that Horwitz might be somebody that the Mariners could look at as an option. So I got to take a drink of water here. I'm going to let you take over. But yeah, that one definitely surprised me the most.
Yeah, when it first was announced, I wasn't like too surprised or shaking my head. But then once I looked into it for a few minutes, I'm like, I don't, like I said, I don't even know if they're a better team after it. In my mind, it's like, why not go get Gleyber Torres for, I don't know, 15 million a year, so 5 million less than Jimenez overall. I think he's cheaper now, but it's like, why don't you do that and keep Horwitz and then use that extra 5 million for like a reliever or something? It just, in my mind, I don't see how it makes him better. Maybe that's us being Mariners fans and like payroll being so tight that we're like looking at it like, oh my God. And maybe the Blue Jays don't have that payroll constraints, and so they don't really care about it. They're like, well, we think Jimenez is better than Horwitz, so we had to pay a premium to upgrade that, and we're willing to do it. And that could be it. But even then, I'm like, I just don't think he's that much of a better player. So yeah, I thought that was a bizarre move.
Yeah, to me, it's like I can understand it more if the Blue Jays were like close, maybe like, okay, it puts them over the top a little bit. But to me, they're just not. So I just kind of an odd move. I'll never give any move an F because there's always some, maybe Jimenez bounces back to like 2 years ago when he had the 130 WRC plus. And if he does that, then, I mean, you've got a borderline MVP candidate on your hands. So, you never know. But yeah, that was probably the most puzzling. And then, not shocked with Soto or anything like that. And it's sad that I kind of have to just take pleasure in that, hey, the Mariners' victory is this player's out of the AL West or out of the American League, but it is what it is with John Stanton calling the shots. So last question I'll have, we've certainly talked about some players, back and forth that we like for the Mariners to acquire. I know we've talked about Brandon, it's Brandon Lau, right? Okay. I always get Lowe and Lau mixed up. It's Brandon Lau. I know you've mentioned him a few times. We've talked about Nico Horner with the Cubs. That's another one similar to the Tristan Casas thing where they've wanted a frontline starter that, and I do agree with Jerry on that. I just don't think, I'm not trading any of those 4 unless I'm just blown away by something. They may have to. I understand where people come from with that, but I don't like it. Is there anybody else you've got your eye on that maybe we haven't talked about, that just, a sleeper name for fans out there that they don't know about? Because listen, for anybody listening, the Mariners are not going to be in the Juan Soto. I mean, obviously not anymore. He's signed, but they're going to be getting more the under the radar guys, the Brandon Laus, the Spencer Horowitzes, guys like that are more likely to be Seattle Mariners. Is there any sneaky guys you've got your eye on that we haven't discussed or maybe just briefly talked about?
Honestly, I don't. I feel like for me, it's still Nico Horner, Brandon Lau. Sounds like Alec Bohm's not getting moved now, which doesn't disappoint me a ton. Like Isak Paredes, if the Cubs were going to move him over Horner, that would be interesting. But yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like there's just not a ton of names out there that make sense. So I feel like for the most part, they've been, discussed kind of up and down. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what they do. Yeah, there's really no names that come to mind at this moment that we haven't touched on before.
Yeah, same for me. And I think that's kind of going to be, I'm with you. I'm kind of out on Alec Bohm now. They wanted Kirby or Gilbert, which there's no way I'm ever doing that. Yeah, that's absolutely insane. That makes you worse as a team, and I like Alec Bohm. And that's the thing. Like, I don't dislike these guys at all. I think Alec Bohm would be a nice piece for the Mariners, but again, it goes back to teams just not wanting the prospects. You think the Phillies might be a team that would be a little bit more interested in the prospects, but I know Drambowski is not much of a prospect hoarder. He's more of a, get me the major league talent and keep going with that. He was like that in Detroit and Boston and Philly now as well. So not super shocking, but I thought maybe you could send some prospects over there for Bohm. Yeah, I really don't. Horner's been a guy we've talked about a lot. I still think it makes sense for the Mariners. You talked a little bit about like a free agent, like a Kevin Biggio, would make some sense for, I know it's not going to excite people out there, but listen, when the two of us are talking about this, we're trying to put teams together that are in the Mariners realm and in their budgets. And those are the guys you have to talk about. I still think Yohan Moncada is a decent, like, bounce back candidate. I'm not going to jump for joy if he's your opening day third baseman, but I could see it working out. One name we talked about, and I'll give you credit because you brought him up, Ramon Urias from Baltimore. I think Ty and Colby have talked about him a few times on Locked On Mariners as well. I guess this will be the last question. Thoughts on him? Because he might be realistic. You got Jordan Westberg over there in Baltimore. But again, they might be wanting pitching and want major league pitching. I don't know, but any thoughts on that? I think that could be an interesting third base option.
Yeah, I think he's kind of a sneaky name that's been better than people realize. I think when I look, he's had like a 110 WRC plus, or maybe even more in the last 3 years. Plays solid defense at third base, pretty cost affordable. So I think this is a guy that, I mean, is better than what you have on the roster now. And so if you get him at third and go, sign Carlos Santana at first and trade for Horner or Brandon Lau, like, I think now you have a team that's pretty well rounded across the board. So I think he's kind of an interesting name that may not cost a ton. Another name that's kind of in that same realm would be like Willie Castro from the Twins. I think I saw they may have to like shave 20 million off their payroll or something crazy like that. And he's worth 6 or 7. So once again, that may be a hindrance to the Mariners. They may not want to go spend 6 or 7 million on a guy that's kind of a super utility, but his bat's probably good enough to put in at second or third. But a guy like that, I wouldn't be my first option. But if they kind of miss or can't get other targets, they may have to start looking at the Ramon Urias and Willie Castro types. Once again, they're both better than what you have at second or third today. And so, like you said earlier, upgrade kind of the team however you can, as much as you can, and you just kind of have to do what you can with the means that you have access to.
Do you think Cole Young's going to be? Jerry said he thinks Cole Young, they think he's ready. That kind of throws a wrench into this too. If they just roll with Cole Young as their opening day second baseman, it does kind of, if he is ready to go, it helps a lot, because then you're looking at just kind of third base and first base. Again, I mean, there's other areas where we'd like to see them take a leap forward, but that would be pretty huge if he's ready to go and can contribute day one.
Yeah, for sure. And I was a little bit surprised because I want to say it was maybe Hollander at the beginning of the offseason when Young was at the AFL. Or there was, maybe he didn't say it, but there was a report saying we don't think he'll be ready till like 2026. So I kind of just put him out of like my mind for the 2025 plans. But then, yeah, you're right. Jerry mentioned like, hey, he may be ready to go at the beginning of the season or soon after. Yeah. And if that's the case, that's huge. So I think Young's the type of guy that maybe doesn't have like a super high ceiling, but he looked pretty good in spring last year in at bats. I just think that his profile is one where he could come to the MLB and, play close to kind of what his potential is early on. It won't be a 130 WRC plus, maybe it's 105, 110, good defense. And I think that's possibly good enough. So yeah, that's a huge development if they do think he's ready to go from opening day.
Yeah, and for people listening, it might not sound sexy numbers, but I mean, my gosh, look what you've gotten from Jorge Polanco and Colton Wong. If you get a 104 WRC plus with slightly above average defense at second base, I mean, if we would have got that from Polanco last year, probably make the playoffs. So,
exactly.
That's another thing to remember too, that it's not just that like guys like Polanco and Colton Wong weren't enough to put this team over the top. It's the fact that they acquired solid major leaguers that were terrible. So if you can just get that kind of, league average production from these guys, you're in good shape.
Yeah, completely agree.
So take one more drink. Again, getting over strep, everybody, so I apologize. But anything else you've got? Anything else you wanted to go over, Mariners related?
No, that covers it for me today. Like I said, good news on the draft. The hot stove is certainly heating up. I think Divish said that don't expect anything this week, but maybe in the week or two following. So maybe before Christmas, there's a move or two that comes down. But yeah, I'm eagerly awaiting the first move because I don't think they're going to make a ton this offseason, maybe 2-3 max. And so I'm eager to see what that first move is because, like I said, it'll be kind of a large portion of what they do this offseason. So it'll give us kind of a good idea of what the team's going to look like for 2025. And so, yeah, eagerly waiting to see what gets done there.
Absolutely. And if any moves happen, I will be on here and I'll have a quick video. And I'm sure if your MarinersSUR is available, he will join me as well. And we will do a breakdown. As soon as we have some moves to talk about, we're ready. We are itching for some new Seattle Mariners. So we will be here. So we're going to wrap it up. My voice is starting to go and I'm coughing up a storm. So not what everybody wants to listen to. Appreciate you coming on as always and breaking stuff down. Yeah, anytime. So thank you all for listening. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Head over to Twitter and subscribe to MarinersSUR's Twitter X account. And we will see you all next time. As always, go Mariners. Peace.